and he's now holding his intestines in his stomach with one hand. At this point, Roy is right next to the helicopter, and he's looking right at it. He should get in the helicopter, but he turns around away from the helicopter.
So today I'm finishing my reaction to the Fat Electrician's video, The Real Rambo, the story of Roy Benavidez. Let's get to it.
So 2 weeks into being there, Roy goes out on a mission, and one of the guys, if he's with, ends up getting shot up, and they have to get this guy medevaced. But they're still being attacked, so they can't go out in the open so a helicopter can land. So the helicopter has to drop what's called a McGuire rig. It's basically just a rope that these guys are going to hook onto, and they're going to pull them straight up out of the canopy of the jungle and fly off with them dangling underneath the helicopter like some badass Pinocchio. Now, usually when you do this, like you can see in this picture, you're stacked on top of one another on the same nylon rope. But for some reason on this day, they dropped 2 nylon ropes. Roy hooked the other guy that's injured up to one, and he hooked himself up to the other. And Roy probably didn't even realize that there was 2 ropes. He just saw a bunch of nylon rope everywhere. He hooked both of them up, and they were going to take off. So they get pulled up out of the canopy. They take off headed towards camp, but because they're each on a different rope, the ropes end up getting crossed, and the nylon ropes start rubbing together. And when nylon rubs up against nylon, it melts because it's plastic. So these ropes are going to end up snapping, and Roy and his buddy are both going to fall to their death unless they can land and get this figured out, and they can't land because they're still being shot at. Now, luckily for Roy and the other guy, the belly man in that helicopter was another one of Roy's friends, a sergeant by the name of Leroy Wright, and he noticed what was going on, and he ties himself off to a 3rd rope and lowers himself out of the helicopter in between the other 2 nylon ropes, allowing his body weight to untangle the ropes as he lowered himself down, saving all 3 of them. 2 days after that, Roy wakes up in his cot. Time to go get breakfast. He heads off towards the chow hall. He's making his way there, and everything just starts scrambling. There's radio transmissions coming in saying it's a Daniel Boone tactical emergency. Daniel Boone is the name of the operation in Cambodia. You're not supposed to be saying that over the radio, period, which means that shit has really hit the fan somewhere. Everybody around him starts scrambling. Helicopters start going out, and helicopters start coming back in, all shot up with injured men on them. And Roy goes up to one of these helicopters trying to figure out what's going on. And the door gunner in this helicopter falls out, and it's a 19-year-old kid that Roy remembered they just celebrated his birthday like a week ago. And this kid falls into Roy's arms and dies on the spot. Roy asks the rest of the helicopter crew what's going on, what's happening, and they tell him that there's a team out there that's getting overrun by hundreds of NVA. So Roy continues to ask him, what team? Who's out there? Did you pick them up? Are they here now? What's going on? And they go, no, we couldn't get close enough to pick these guys up. They were so overrun, and we were taking too much fire from the helicopters. We don't know who it was, but it was the big black dude that saved you the other day. And Roy immediately knows they're talking about Leroy, and his entire team is still out there. So Roy asks them, are you going back out there? And they said, yeah, we're going to go back out there, but we're not going to be able to land. The only thing we're going to be able to do is drop ammunition out of the helicopter above them so they have ammunition to keep fighting. And to Roy Benavidez, it sounds an awful lot like somebody needs help. And with that, he runs over, grabs his medical bag, jumps in the helicopter, and they take off. A couple minutes into the flight there, Roy realizes that in his hurry to run and grab his aid bag so that he could help, he made a mistake. A really, really big mistake. He forgot his gun.
God damn it!
He is now in a helicopter flying into combat with no gun, no food, no water, no grenades. He literally has an 8-inch recon knife and his aid bag, and that is it.
I cannot imagine what he was feeling and experiencing in the moment, realizing that he had forgotten his weapon. But when you join the U.S. military, it is drilled in your head that you cannot be more than 1 arm's length away from your weapon. It has to be in your possession at all times, unless another soldier is watching it or it's locked up in a weapons rack. So I can't tell you why he didn't have his weapon on his person, but this was macv-sog during the Vietnam War, so who knows what their SOP actually said.
Despite that, Roy is still determined to help these guys. So they get there, they drop the ammunition out of the side of the helicopter on top of these guys, and then they fly off. And Roy says, get me as close as you can and land this helicopter so I can jump out. And they get him like 100, 150 yards away from where this team is injured and pinned down. And Roy jumps out of the helicopter and starts running towards them. He makes it 10 steps, gets shot, drops him. He got shot in the leg. He tells himself that he tripped and landed on a thorn bush, and he's not actually shot, but he knows he's shot. He keeps running towards him, and he makes it another 50 yards, and he gets shot again. This time, it's a glancing blow to his helmet. He doesn't know that yet. Maybe he got shot in the head. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was shrapnel. He has no idea. He'll figure it out later if he makes it. So he just keeps running to the team, and he finally ends up making it to him. So he makes it to where the team is pinned down. They're all spread out, way too far out. They're not in a defensive position. They're running out of ammunition. Every single person there is shot, blown up, everybody is in horrible shape. So Roy gets to work. He picks up an AK-47 off a dead NVA soldier as he runs to each individual team member, giving them morphine, whatever medical aid he can, and then dragging them over to this anthill, this big pile of dirt, to get them in this defensive position where they're actually semi-close together and they can start fighting back. Roy ends up making it to the guy with the radio, and he's like, this is Tango Mike, I've still got men on the ground. I need to get these guys medevaced. I have green smoke grenades. I'll pop them so you know where we're at. While the helicopters are on their way, Roy keeps going and getting more guys and dragging them back to the anthill, giving himself and everybody else morphine. The helicopters finally show up. The door gunners lay down suppressing fire, and Roy starts loading up the guys at the anthill onto the helicopter, but he still has more men out towards the bush line that he hasn't been able to make it to yet. So he gets all the guys on the helicopter, and then he tells the door gunner, hey, we still have men over there, cover me. And Roy takes off running next to the helicopter as the helicopter is gliding next to him, and him and the door gunner are returning fire into the wood line, trying to make it to the other men. So Roy and the helicopter make it to the last guy that Roy knows of, and it's not Leroy. So he asks this guy, where's Leroy at? And that guy points him towards the wood line and says he got hit back there, and he's got a bunch of confidential classified information on him. So Roy decides that he's gonna go get it. He takes off running towards where this guy pointed him out in the wood line, but the helicopter can't follow because it can't get that close to the trees. So the helicopter door gunner continues to lay suppressing fire while Roy runs into the tree line and finds Leroy's body. He gets all the classified intel off Leroy's body, and then he begins dragging Leroy's corpse towards the helicopter because he at least wants to bring his friend's body home. And then he gets shot in the back. As we all know, it's always darkest right before the dawn, but as we also all know, sometimes it's darkest right before it gets even fucking darker. After being shot, Roy turns around, realizing he's not going to be able to bring his friend's body back with him, and starts running towards the helicopter. And then he sees the helicopter pilot get shot through the window as the helicopter spins out of control and crashes. Roy makes it to the crash site, and everybody there that survived is pretty much ready to call it a day. They've accepted the fact that they're about to die, and Roy hasn't. He starts dragging everybody, getting them away from the burning helicopter and getting them into another defensive position so that they can fight back. He's going and getting AK-47s off of dead NVA soldiers, getting these guys guns. He has guys that can't even see. They're missing eyes, and he's just telling them, shoot that way. Under Roy's leadership, they start fighting back, and Roy starts calling in airstrikes, F-111s, F-4 Phantoms, gunships, anything and everything they have, and they just start bombing this tree line with all they've got, and they do it over and over, but the enemy soldiers just keep coming and coming. There's literally hundreds of them, and this goes on for hours.
I didn't even want to stop it, but most likely the NBA were all hanging out in tunnels during the airstrikes, and that's why they were able to keep on coming and coming. Wow, this is intense.
It's too hot for them to get a helicopter in there to load people up, and every time they bomb the tree line, more enemy soldiers run out of it towards Roy and his crew. And it gets to the point that they're literally using the dead bodies of soldiers as sandbags to stop bullets. Roy and the men on the ground don't realize it at this point in time, but the crews up in the gunships that are mowing down the forest that the enemies are coming from are starting to mow down so much vegetation that they're starting to see straight lines, which don't occur naturally in nature. These are bunkers with fortified machine gun positions. The macv-sog team didn't just stumble across an entire battalion of men. They walked right into an entire NVA base inside of Cambodia. Eventually, the air crews come to the realization that with this base there's got to be at least 1,000 men, an entire battalion there, and there's a road where they can bus in even more men for reinforcements. They're not going to be able to keep this up and get Roy and everybody else to be alive and handle this the right way. So the only thing that they can do is to have a carpet bomb of that forest, and at the exact same moment that those bombs start dropping, they're going to send in the helicopters to try to pick up Roy and everybody else. So a group of A-37 Super Tweets bomb the tree line as a Huey comes down, and Roy starts helping to load these men into the helicopter. Some of them have lost so much blood they can't even pick themselves up. And while this is happening, the North Vietnamese soldiers rush them. They're coming straight towards the helicopter. They're firing. Roy's trying to load the men on while firing back. The door gunners returning fire, and one of them ends up making it to Roy, and for some reason, whether he was out of ammo or whether he was trying to take an American alive, he hits Roy in the back of the head with the buttstock of his rifle. Roy falls down, and then he swings it again at Roy's face, dislocating his jaw. Roy, somehow still conscious, gets up, starts trying to wrestle this guy to the ground. He lost his gun. All he has is his recon knife, and this guy's got his rifle with a bayonet on it. And the enemy soldier goes to lunge at Roy with the bayonet, ends up cutting Roy's arm, and then Roy lunges at him, misses. The enemy soldier lunges back. He ends up stabbing Roy in the stomach with the bayonet, and Roy ends up getting to him with the recon knife, stabbing him in the chest and killing him. Roy pulls out the bayonet, can't get his recon knife out of this guy's chest, and he's now holding his intestines in his stomach with one hand. At this point, Roy's right next to the helicopter, and he's looking right at it. He should get in the helicopter, but he turns around away from the helicopter, and there's 2 Americans still out there returning fire that are able to fight. They're just not able to walk, and Roy runs towards them. Roy gets there, picks up the one that can't walk entirely, and starts helping to drag him towards the helicopter, and the other guy can't crawl, but he can't walk, so he literally starts walking on his knees using an AK-47 like it's a crutch. They get to the helicopter. Roy helps load them in the helicopter, grabs the AK-47 that the guy was using as a crutch, turns around again and starts shooting at NVA soldiers that are charging towards the helicopter as the injured men behind him literally grab Roy and drag him into the helicopter as they take off. As it becomes clear to absolutely everyone that Roy Benavidez did not just bring a knife to a gunfight, the communists brought an army to a Roy Benavidez fight and still couldn't win. After saving all the surviving members of the original macv-sog team and the first helicopter crew, through 6 hours of combat, Roy has sustained over 37 different life-threatening injuries, multiple gunshot wounds, over 20 shrapnel wounds. He has been bayoneted and he has been clubbed, and after being dragged into the helicopter, he finally loses consciousness.
Just a flesh wound.
I almost don't have any words. So I believe they're making a movie out of a story, but they're probably going to have to tone down his exploits. Because just like Desmond Doss's story in Hacksaw Ridge, the movie producers had to tone down his story because they were scared that the audience would watch it and not believe half of what they saw.
His next memory is being literally waist deep inside of a body bag as an American medic is zipping it up. His eyes are caked with blood and he can't open them. He can't talk to the medic because his jaw is dislocated and he's lost so much blood that he can't move. And from the medic's perspective, he doesn't even realize that Roy's an American because he's Hispanic, he's got the same skin tone as a North Vietnamese, and Roy's body is literally laying on top of 3 dead NVA soldiers that in Roy's fog of morphine and adrenaline, he loaded into the helicopter because he didn't want to leave anybody behind. Roy can literally feel the teeth on the zipper closing as it gets closer and closer to his head, and once the zipper reaches his neck, somebody stops the medic and says, "Hold on, that's Benavidez," and he instructs the medic to double check and make sure that Roy is actually dead. And the medic argues with him, and Roy's buddy says, "I don't care, double check." And the medic zips down the body bag a little bit and puts his hand on Roy's chest and leans forward to listen and see if he can hear breathing. And at this moment, Roy takes what he describes as the best shot he's ever made in his entire life. He spits directly in that medic's face.
Get him that hawk.
And with that, they get Roy out of the body bag, they get him in the aid station, and they start trying to do everything they can for him, but they're almost positive that he's not going to make it. After his chain of command figured out everything that had happened and that Roy was pretty much the only reason that the 8 other men that survived made it out of there alive, immediately got him signed up to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. The only reason they didn't try to get him the Medal of Honor on the spot was because they didn't think Roy was going to survive, and they wanted to get him an award that they could give him in the field so that he could receive it before he passed away. But Roy Benavidez had other plans. He doesn't pass away. Instead, he recovers. And not only does he recover, he yet again refuses to get med boarded out of the Army into a medical retirement and continues to serve an additional 10 years in the United States Army. And during that time, they try to get him awarded the Medal of Honor because if anybody deserves it, it's this guy, right? But for some reason or another, it always ends up getting rejected, and it gets rejected again and again and over and over. They just keep rejecting his Medal of Honor. But there's nothing that Roy or anybody else could do. For some reason or another, the committee in charge of awarding the Medal of Honor simply did not want to give Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez the award that he had earned. So he did.
If you were part of the United States Congress and saw that award on your desk and you saw the words macv-sog or Cambodia, do you think you would actually approve it? No.
Did the only thing he could do. He just kept on keeping on. So he went on, served throughout the military until 1976 before finally retiring as Master Sergeant Benavidez, the recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. As Roy retires, there was another press push about how incredible he was, wondering why he didn't earn the Medal of Honor, and this ends up connecting him with one of the men that he had saved that Roy actually thought had died. And this man gets a hold of Roy almost 12 years after the fact, and he tells Roy that he's going to write up everything that he witnessed and send it into this committee again. And yet again, even despite all this new information, the committee in charge of awarding the Medal of Honor rejected it again. And then they realized what they were doing wrong. They were telling the whole truth. They were saying that Roy hopped in a helicopter, flew into Cambodia, and helped save a bunch of macv-sog members. And as far as the US government's concerned at this point in time, up until like the mid-80s, macv-sog, A, doesn't exist, and B, if it did, it definitely would not be operating in a neutral territory like Laos or Cambodia, because that was against the rules.
I can neither confirm nor deny details of any operation without the Secretary's approval.
So the politicians and the bureaucrats in charge realize that if they give Roy the Medal of Honor for saving macv-sog members in Cambodia, which wasn't supposed to be happening, there could be political backlash, and they're not going to metaphorically stick their necks on the line just to give Roy what he deserves, despite the fact that Roy put his entire life on the line for them. So bearing this in mind, they redo all the paperwork, they jump through all the hoops to try to get Roy the Medal of Honor again, and this time, rather than saying that Roy's courageous actions occurred in Cambodia, they simply said that they happened to the west of Lock-In Airfield, which was where Roy was stationed. They just didn't bother to say how far west. And once you know it, it gets approved. Roy Benavidez receives the Medal of Honor in 1981 from President Ronald Reagan, 15 years after the fact. After getting what he had earned, he finally gets to go home with his wife and kids and enjoy his retirement for all of like a year and a half. Because on a random day in 1983, he receives a letter in the mail from the US government informing him that he would not continue to receive his veterans disability benefits from his injuries that he sustained during the war. And Roy's not having it. He goes straight to the media, starts putting out press releases and giving interviews talking about how ridiculous this is and putting political pressure right back on the politicians. And wouldn't you know it, a couple weeks later, the US government comes out with a statement of like, oh hey, we're sorry that we're doing this. We haven't been handling it appropriately. We're going to continue to do it, but we're going to do it in a more humane way for everybody involved. And while I can't prove this, I'm willing to guarantee that Roy Benavidez got the notification of like, oh, sorry you got that letter. Obviously this doesn't apply to such a high profile person that's got enough leverage to be a pain in our ass. Here's your benefits, but we're going to go ahead and fuck everybody else.
The VA was not sorry that they sent the letter. They're sorry that they got caught.
Roy wasn't going to allow it. He came out and said that if they can try to do this to him, he can't imagine what they're going to try to do to everybody else. So he keeps fighting for not only himself, but for the other 350,000 veterans that were getting their benefits cut, right? Because they need help too, and Roy's gonna help them. So he keeps pushing and putting more pressure on the US government. Basically just comes out and says, hey, the same Ronald Reagan administration that gave me my Medal of Honor is now telling me and a bunch of other veterans that we're not good enough for the benefits that we earned. And with that, he finally gets to testify in front of the House Senate committee in charge of this entire operation, and they end up shutting the entire thing down, preserving the benefits for 350,000 veterans. And with that, Roy Benavidez could finally go home, enjoy his retirement, and live happily ever after. So, in conclusion, when somebody needs help, you help them. And for the love of God, the fact that somebody renamed Fort Bragg Fort Liberty and not Fort Benavidez instead is borderline criminal. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
I think he's going to have some outtakes, but please go ahead and go to his channel and smash his like button. And while you're at it, if you smash mine too, I would really appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, hey, real quick. If you guys wanted more, there's a book called Legend by Eric Blim, all about Roy Benavidez. The author spent like 3.5 years researching for it, and he actually helped me make this video. So if you guys wanted to check it out, it's over on Amazon, and I'm sure it's on his website if you wanted to Google it too. I'll have it all linked down below. Thanks for watching.
After that PlayStation comment, I'm taking these back.
Come on. That's not funny. I want those.
No.
They locked me in our staging area and started unloading. Started identifying the bodies. They found out I loaded 3 dead enemy soldiers in that helicopter. I didn't want to leave anybody behind. My mission was to recover the classified material, so if anybody had it, he was on the helicopter. They left the 3 enemy soldiers on the side, and because I sort of look Oriental, they thought I was one of them, so they let me lay right next to them. And they were putting us in body bags. And I remember that my feet being lifted, and I was inserted into the body bag, and I could hear that zipper coming up, and I thought, oh my God, no, no. And I couldn't talk because my jaws were locked, and I could hear that zipper coming up, and one of my buddies was doing the Mexican head dance, and he was yelling at the doctor, that's Roy Benavidez. The doctor said, sorry, there's nothing I can do for him. I'll find out later. Jerry Cottenham made that doctor at least to feel my heartbeat. When I felt that hand on my chest, I made the luckiest shot I ever made in my life. I spit in the doctor's face. You know, there's a saying among us veterans, for those that had fought for it, life has a special flavor. The protected will never know. You have never lived till you almost died. And it is us veterans that pray for peace most of all, especially the wounded, because we have to suffer the wounds of war. I'm asked hundreds of times, would you do it over again? In my 25 years in the military, I feel like I've been overpaid for the service to my country. There'll never be enough paper to print the money, nor enough gold in Fort Knox for me to have to keep from doing what I did. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm even prouder that I've earned the privilege to wear the Green Beret. I live by the motto of duty, honor, country. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
I just got a little emotional just hearing him speak. So he actually ended up dedicating his life to speaking to school children and encouraging them to stay in school and to say no to drugs. He wanted to teach others that when people need help, you help. I mean, that was one of his big legacies. And I think that he is a perfect embodiment of that. The utmost respect to him, and may he rest in peace. If you do want to watch another one of his videos, and here you go, or you can check out this video of another badass.